In the roaring heart of 1980s Australia, while the world raced toward globalization and automation, a storm of steel, sweat, and pride echoed through cavernous factory halls. This was the sound of Holden, Australia's most iconic car maker, fighting to keep its soul alive. Behind every Commodore that cruised suburban streets, every ute that roared across the outback, and every badge that gleamed in a driveway, there was a battleground few ever saw. A place where men and machines worked in brutal harmony, where sparks flew like fireworks, paint fumes clung to the air, and the hum of conveyor belts never stopped. This was Holden's assembly line. But it wasn't just about cars. It was about jobs, about identity, about the belief that Australia could build world-class machines on its own soil, its own way. While Japanese imports flooded the market and GM's global grip tightened, Holden's factories in Elizabeth and Dandenong stood defiant, an iron backbone holding up an entire industry. This is not just a story of machines, it's the untold story of the people, the battles, and the transformations that shaped Holden's greatest decade of manufacturing, and foreshadowed its eventual fall. Welcome to the real story behind Holden's 1980s assembly lines. Chapter 1. Titans of the South. Holden's factories power a nation. The 1980s were a decade of duality. Australia stood on the edge of globalization, but Holden was still fighting to keep its roots deep in local soil. The Elizabeth plant in South Australia was Holden's crown jewel. Built in 1963, by the time the 80s rolled in, it had grown into a mechanical city of its own. A sprawling network of production lines, tool shops, and loading docks that covered more than 1 million square feet. Elizabeth was where the magic happened. The VB to VL Commodores rolled off these lines with a rumble of defiance. Rugged Aussie sedans that could handle punishing outback roads and still look sleek in the city. The WB Statesman and Caprice, also assembled here, were Holden's answer to luxury, giving government officials and executives a local alternative to European imports. Even the humble Holden ute, part tradie workhorse, part cultural icon, was born here. In Victoria, another giant stood, the Dandenong plant. While it didn't build cars in full, it birthed the engines that gave them life. The Dandenong lines produced Holden's legendary 253 and 308 V8s, thunderous mills that sent power coursing through every Commodore and Statesman. This plant also crafted gearboxes, transmissions, and precision components. Without Dandenong, Elizabeth would have been a skeleton. Further north, the Acacia Ridge facility in Queensland handled minor assembly and vehicle distribution. And though Pagewood in New South Wales closed its doors in 1980, its legacy lived on. It had birthed the Tarana and Sunbird, names etched deep into Holden's DNA. Meanwhile, Woodville continued to supply metal stampings for frames and panels. Together, these plants formed a web of production that kept Holden cars truly Australian, built by Australians for Australian roads. Chapter 2. From Steel to Street, the Symphony of Assembly. Imagine a raw sheet of steel, cold, unassuming. In Holden's factories, it entered one end of the line as nothing more than a blank canvas. By the time it emerged at the other, it had become a piece of rolling history. The process began with stamping. Massive hydraulic presses transformed flat metal into the complex shapes of doors, hoods, and roofs. This wasn't a gentle operation. It was brutal, loud, and precise. Every thundering press cycle shaped Australia's motoring future. Then came body construction. Sparks flew as robots, new to the Holden lines in the early 80s, performed spot welds with unwavering consistency. These robotic arms, sourced from pioneers like Kuka and Fanuc, were game changers. Though their arrival caused unrest among workers, there was no denying their speed and precision. The skeletons of Commodores and Chimeras came together like clockwork. Once framed, the car body entered the paint shop. First, a dip in anti-corrosion baths, then a parade through drying ovens, and finally, the application of iconic Holden colours: Panorama Silver, Alchemy Purple, Phantom Black. Painters, some human, some robotic, gave each car its identity. Then came final assembly. Engines, often the 253 V8 or the hardy 202 six-cylinder, were married to the chassis. Skilled hands installed dashboards, looms of wiring, seats, and trim. Despite rising automation, it was still human craftsmanship that defined the interior. Workers knew when a bolt felt right, or when a door needed just a little more persuasion to close flush. And before a single car reached the showroom, it faced the test track. Every Commodore was driven. Gauges checked, brakes tested, suspension pushed. If it didn't pass, it didn't ship. Chapter 3. The Workers. Flesh and blood behind the steel. The heartbeat of Holden wasn't its machines, it was its people. Thousands of Australians earned their livelihoods on those factory floors. Fathers and sons, husbands and wives, apprentices and veterans, all working shoulder to shoulder. The culture inside Holden plants was tough but proud. A 3-shift system kept the machines humming day and night. The smell of oil and the rattle of impact guns became the soundtrack to daily life. Lunch breaks were short, but filled with laughter, often taken on the floor next to the very cars workers were helping build. The AMWU, the Australian Manufacturing Workers Union, held powerful sway. Strikes weren't uncommon. Wages, working conditions, and automation sparked frequent standoffs between labour and management. In some years, strikes halted entire production runs, costing Holden millions. Still, there was camaraderie, pride. These workers didn't just build cars, they built icons. A Commodore that rolled off the line today might race at Bathurst tomorrow. And when families across Australia piled into their Geminis or Statesmans for a road trip, they were trusting the hands of those anonymous heroes in Elizabeth and Dandenong. Chapter 4. Machines Take Over. The Robotic Revolution. The 1980s saw Holden walk a tightrope. Japan was rising fast. Toyota and Nissan cars were flooding the market, built cheaper and often with better quality. To survive, Holden needed to modernise. Enter the robots. Welding bots slashed production times. Automated drying ovens reduced paint flaws. Laser-guided alignment machines ensured panels lined up to the millimetre. Computer-aided designs brought science into the design room. Engines were tested by computers, not just by ear. Just-in-time inventory systems, borrowed from Japan, reduced the need for massive warehouses. Parts arrived almost exactly when needed. This streamlined Holden's operation, but made it fragile. A single delay upstream could grind the entire line to a halt. These upgrades boosted efficiency, but at a cost. Jobs were lost. Long-time workers feared replacement by machines. Tensions rose. The union fought hard to protect jobs, but even the best negotiations couldn't reverse the tide of automation. Still, without these changes, Holden wouldn't have survived the decade at all. Chapter 5. The Cars of a Generation. Holden's 1980s lineup. The factory floors of the 1980s gave birth to some of the most iconic Holdens ever made. The VB to VL Commodores were the company's backbone. Introduced in 1978 and refined through the 80s, these mid-sized sedans were Holden's answer to the global oil crisis. The VL Commodore, with its Nissan-sourced RB30 engine, was a gamble, but it worked. Its turbocharged variant would go on to become a legend among street racers and tuners alike. The WB Statesman and Caprice, meanwhile, were Holden's last big sedans. Big, bold, and built like tanks, they were Australia's luxury cruisers, sold to government fleets, executives, and those who refused to buy European. Then there was the Gemini. Smaller, lighter, and far more efficient, it was Holden's attempt to win over fuel-conscious buyers. Produced until 1986, it was reliable and cheap, but it couldn't quite keep up with the rising wave of Japanese imports. Holden's boldest move, however, was the Chimera. Sleek and front-wheel drive, it was a radical shift from Holden's rear-wheel drive roots. Built with GM's J platform, it was modern, but flawed. Poor reliability and weak engines crippled its reputation. For many, the Chimera symbolized Holden's struggle to adapt to a rapidly changing world. Chapter 6. External battles, Holden versus the world. Outside the factory gates, Holden was fighting a war it couldn't always see. Japanese imports were the silent assassins. The Toyota Corona, the Mazda 626, the Honda Accord. They offered better fuel economy, better reliability, and often better build quality at a lower price. And as Australian tariffs fell under government pressure, the gates opened wide. Holden's response? Cut costs, push automation. But this sparked more internal battles, workers striking over redundancies and pay freezes. In one particularly brutal period, a nationwide parts delay caused entire shifts at Elizabeth to be cancelled. The paint dried, the welders cooled. Silence echoed through the plant. At the same time, GM's global struggles filtered down to Australia. Budgets were slashed, projects shelved, promising engines never saw production. Engineers at Fisherman's Bend would work late into the night on designs that might never make it to steel. Despite it all, Holden pushed on. The workers kept turning spanners, the presses kept stamping, and the cars kept rolling off the line. Chapter 7. Legacy forged in steel and sweat. By the end of the 1980s, it was clear the world had changed. The days of total Australian manufacturing dominance were fading. But Holden's 1980s assembly lines left a legacy that endures. They were the last era where Australian cars were 100% homegrown. Engines, bodies, trims, and paint all crafted under one sunburnt sky. The skills learned during this time laid the foundation for modern Australian manufacturing, from defence to aerospace to robotics. Today, the Commodores of that decade are collector's gold. A VL Calais Turbo, a WB Caprice, or a clean VH SLE. They fetch top dollar and draw crowds at car meets. Holden's 253 and 308 V8s are being rebuilt by enthusiasts who weren't even born when they first ran. And the factories? Elizabeth's line finally went silent in 2017. But its spirit lives on in every burnout, every drag strip, every Aussie who still proudly wears a Holden badge on their chest. The end of the line. Not the end of the story. Holden's 1980s assembly lines were more than just industrial sites. They were living, breathing ecosystems, part machine, part community, and all heart. They stood for a country that believed in doing things its own way, even when the odds were stacked high and the world was shifting fast. For every Commodore that cruised down Main Street, for every WB that hauled tools across the outback, and for every Gemini that taught someone how to drive, there's a story of a worker, a machine, and a moment in time when Australia still built its own future with its own hands. Did you, or someone you know, work on Holden's 1980s assembly lines? What do you remember most? The noise, the mateship, the cars themselves? We'd love to hear your story. And if you could bring back one 1980s Holden, which would it be? Let us know in the comments, because history only lives on when we share it.